Okay, if I can get everybody to please find your seats and sign in. Betty, do you know how to sign in? Okay. Councillor Joyner, Councillor Dart. Councillor Volpatti. We got 13 so far, folks. 13. I think we got more in the back room. Chris is doing it. Okay.
No? Did you want to work in there? Okay, I'll work in there.
Okay. Get councillors to make sure you're signed in. Councillor Hodgson, sign in. Yep. Okay, we've achieved a quorum. It's 6:32. Why don't we get started? I'll call the meeting to order, and I'll ask if everybody could please check your devices, make sure they're on silent or vibrate. And with that said, I'll ask everybody if you could please rise for a moment of silence. For the adoption of the agenda, are there any changes or additions to the agenda? Councillor Dart.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to, under Public Works, there's an item I'd like to bring forward after the delegation is finished.
Thank you.
Do you want all the minutes or just that one item?
Just that one item would be fine.
Please, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any further changes or additions to the minutes? Seeing none, I'll ask, could I please have a mover and seconder for the minutes? Councillor Burrows, Councillor Rigby, all those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Any disclosures? Councillor Timms.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to declare an indirect pecuniary interest in item CSD 28. The item in corporate services regarding litigation regarding the development charges, as those policies may have an indirect pecuniary interest in a family business.
Okay, and does that pertain to the item in closed session as well?
It is the item, yes.
Thank you.
Closed session. Thank you.
Any further disclosures? Seeing none, please let that be noted. Moving on to presentations, we have one presentation tonight, Smart Cities Challenge, and I'll ask Stuart Hendry, the Chief Information Officer, if you could please approach the podium. Welcome.
Thank you. And thanks for the opportunity for Nathan and myself to have a chat with you guys about the Smart Cities Challenge that the federal government launched just towards the end of last year. I'm Stuart Hendry. I'm the Chief Information Officer of the region. Nathan Childs is going to be joining me as well, and he's an information research analyst with the region as well. So hopefully you enjoy what we're about to go through. It's exciting stuff. And try the technology. I should know how to work this. Am I doing something wrong? Are you guys playing with me? All right. There we go. There's a fog that had to go in. Perfect. You guys are just messing with me. So just quickly, we won't be long, but we're gonna take you through what is the Smart Cities Challenge. Some of you might not be familiar with what that is. Some of the engagement that we did along with that, where we landed as an area that we want to impact within the community, how that aligns with some of the strategies, research documentation that exists in our communities, as well as how we're going to leverage data and technology, and then some of the next steps on that. So just quickly, so on November 23rd of last year, the federal government launched what they called the Smart Cities Challenge. And that challenge was open to municipalities, regional governments, and Indigenous communities, or any combination thereof. There were some smaller details in there, but that was essentially the sense of it. So it wasn't open to other broader public sector companies or other community organizations, very much centered towards municipal government. The reason people got excited about this is there's some big money on the table. When they launched this, there's 4 prizes, the largest being of $50 million, 2 prizes of 10, and then an additional prize of $5 million. With each one of those prizes, there's also what they call a finalist prize. So for each one of these prizes, they narrow it down, they select 5 finalists for each one, and then each one of those finalists is given $250,000 to further refine what your proposal was that you brought forward, that would then be submitted again, and then out of that selection, communities would win one of those prizes. The Niagara region, the Niagara community, I'll say, put in a submission for the $10 million category. The timeline on it is fairly aggressive, which is exciting. It was launched, the launch was November 23rd. 5 months later was the due date for the submissions on it. So just April 24th, just last week, Niagara submitted their submission on time, and we were notified that we met all the eligibility requirements, and it's moving through the next steps. In the summer, they're going to announce who those finalists are. And then in the winter, you'll be expected to deliver your fulsome proposal, leveraging the $250,000 that they gave you to submit a final proposal on that. And then they'll be announcing the winners in the spring of the following year. From my perspective, for a federal program, very aggressive, and I really hope they stick to it because it's created a lot of excitement. Some of the objectives of the Smart Cities Challenge. When they set it up, it was really all about, I'll kind of put, so these are there for you, but there's really 4 key pillars to this, and a key one being they want to deliver out, they want to impact outcomes in your community. It's actually, interestingly enough, less about technology, and they really reinforced this through all of the information sessions they had and one-on-one conversations we had with the Infrastructure Canada directly on this. They wanted you to demonstrate that you're actually going out and making meaningful change in your community in a way that will impact positive outcomes. At the end of the day, they want you to take an innovative approach to that, and that's where some of the technology, using data, connected technologies to help drive that forward. And the other part they're really looking for, they're looking for people to forge new partnerships, develop new networks, think about unique opportunities to partner in the community to deliver on this. And then a key thing for them is they want what you bring forward to be scalable and replicable across the country. So we couldn't really look at a thing that was purely Niagara-centric that was unique to us, because that wouldn't really kind of meet the criteria of the four key things. So you're looking for something that you're going to solve that is also meaningful outside in the community as well. One of the areas that, one of those four pillars, forging new partnerships and creating partnerships, I honestly believe that we're unparalleled in this. When we submitted our application, I mentioned, it could be municipalities, it could be regional government, it could be Indigenous communities or partners thereof. We submitted an application that was all 12 municipalities and the region together on that. I don't believe there's anyone in Canada that's demonstrated that level of collaboration. I'm only aware of one other regional government that submitted at this point in time. And again, the idea too was if a regional government was going to submit, it had to have the support of every municipality within it as well. So I think we really knocked that out of the park. We also had a lot of other partners playing and these logos aren't up there just for show. These people played a very active role over the last 5 months, helping shape the proposal that Niagara would bring forward for this competition. Speaking of some of the engagement, so we had during that short window from the time it was announced, we had 7 open community meetings. They're listed where we had them there. We had 10 stakeholder meetings, which was a combination of senior leadership from municipal and community partners. We had a couple of online surveys with some good response. Our responses were also released on the Niagara Open Data Platform as well. A big component of this competition was also putting forward solutions that are open, transparent, and available. So I think it resonates well with that. Some great interaction on social media, over 225,000 interactions on social media. And then I think very unique and an awesome opportunity for Niagara was the last one on that list there. Through one of the professors at Brock University, we were actually able to have them create an MBA assignment where they had to submit a paper specifically on Niagara Smart City Challenge and around the subject that we had landed on. And so just some fantastic input there, unique ideas, great ideas in that space. So through that process, we looked at a number of different options, problems to tackle, what outcomes we wanted to impact in the community. And if you ever want to chat offline, happy to chat with some of the other ideas that came up on. But where we actually landed was impacting a sense of belonging in the community. That was the outcome that we wanted to impact, the way people feel. And that might feel a little loose, a little airy-fairy, but it's actually, it's a measurable index. It's part of Stats Canada. And within Canada, we're somewhat average in that rating, but, and Nathan's going to go into more details in this in a moment, but we sit at 72%. 72% of people in Niagara have a strong sense of belonging. Best in Canada is 88, but there's some play in there that'll make sense when Nathan speaks to it in a sec. But there are a number of things that influence sense of belonging that really kind of resonated with our communities and really allowed everyone to rally around this as being the outcome that we want to impact. It was about economic inclusion in the community, safety, housing, social inclusion as well, and public spaces as well. All of these contribute to people's sense of belonging and move those dials. But I'm going to pass it over to Nathan, and he can kind of take you through where some opportunities are in that sense of belonging.
Thanks, Stuart. So the Canadian Community of Health asks participants to measure their sense of belonging on a 4-unit scale from very weak to very strong. In Niagara, 72% of residents that were polled rated as either having a somewhat high or somewhat strong to a very strong sense of belonging. The interesting thing that Niagara is still trailing behind the national median for communities and far behind best in class, as you'll see on that first line in the chart. You may also notice within the graph, we've got it broken out by age cohorts. They do this in the report. You'll notice on the either end of the spectrum, we're performing above the median, but the true spot that we need to focus on are the young to mid-adult age groups, and you'll see where we trail drastically behind in that chart. Sense of belonging, like the dashboard or the dashboard dials, are affected by multiple measures. Here you'll see the top 5 categories, including economic inclusion, safety, security, housing, family, school, and public space. Below that are some potential measures that we'll be looking to measure, as well as affect through the Smart City initiative. On the other side of that, studies show that an outcome to a strong sense of belonging is contribution to the community. We'll be looking at that as well through social, civic, and economic participation. I've just posted a single example for each of those sections here, but there are multiple measures that we'll be looking at, such as volunteerism, participation in sports leagues, as well as small to medium business growth.
So as Nathan's pointed out, there's a lot of measures here, and that was one of the key deliverables when they submitted the Smart Cities Challenge requirements. It needed to be measurable, it needed to be ambitious, measurable, and achievable. So when we talk about the different stats, it's about how do we take all those different numbers and roll that up to sense and belonging and actually move that index measure in a forward direction. We also did, with the engagement, I mean, through the short window, we did some engagement. But as a community, we've been engaging for years. There's nothing new here. We've got all kinds of documents that support this and tie back to that whole sense of belonging. In the diagram here, you'll see a number of different documents or strategies that all reference in some capacity that sort of sense of belonging or inclusion in the community. So it resonates well, and it's that sort of the backwards research or the looking at the literature review and what we had available just reinforced that we landed in the right place for that. So part of it is also, so how do we leverage data and technology to improve sense of belonging on that? And we really started looking into two areas. We looked at implementing sort of the idea of community hubs and different types of community hubs. And within your agendas, you actually have the full submission that we put in, and actually details all these things out in much more detail. But it was about creating different opportunities for people to gather and leveraging technology to make that attractive to them and for them to participate in that. The other area that we'd focused on was what we're calling a digital ecosystem that makes the invisible members of society visible. But really for us, that's about leveraging data and leveraging artificial intelligence to look at that data, look for things that you don't intuitively see that. Within our proposal, we actually referenced some of the work that was done in Ben, and I think a lot of you people are familiar with that application, but it has the concept of opportunities, in that case jobs, and people looking for opportunities, and the journey that people might take to get to those opportunities. Conceptually, we kind of took that and we kind of really blew that out, and we started looking at it beyond that. It's, what other opportunities are actually going to contribute to people's sense of belonging. We talked about, the employment was one, obviously, but the volunteering, mentoring, recreation, other things that allow you to participate in that. But also looking at artificial intelligence to go beyond sort of known opportunities, known people, and using that to kind of go out and scan what's available out in the internet and other places to pull information and create those connections that people might not necessarily see. And one of the other things that's in our proposal is the concept of a digital identity. There's a lot of traction globally on this as well, but also specifically in Canada. There's a lot of work being done at the federal and the provincial level to create what's really a single digital identity, getting away from the concept of having to have your passport, having to have your driver's license, and everywhere you go, they're asking for information, and they're asking for different information everywhere you go. And you really don't know, if I have a twin brother, is it really me, or is it my brother showing his driver's license, things like that. So kind of moving towards a digital identity that allows you to identify yourself, create additional efficiencies, gain access to services that you might not be able to without having the proper identification. So again, there's more detail in the proposal on all the things that we've talked about. But regarding what's next for this, the finalist notification we're expecting in the summer of 2018. As I mentioned, the finalists, and I'm going to assume will be one, contingent on that $250,000 award. Within the proposal, we've actually identified what we have to spend that money on. That was one of the requirements of it. But what we're really looking at is consultation around governance and sustainment. This is a Niagara community initiative. This is not a Niagara region or individual municipality initiative. So we're really looking at what's that governance model need to look like, and how do we sustain it going forward so it transcends terms of council, terms of staff, all that sort of thing. One of the things that we've talked about in our proposal is also the acquisition of data. So we're limited in our ability to analyze the opportunities depending on how much data we have. And there's opportunities to oversample for our community and get more granular on where the opportunities are to impact those communities. We're also looking at engagement strategy, communication plan. And then one of our key things is looking at some of the concepts we have and doing proof of concepts. That whole concept of let's try this. Is it going to work? Is there some traction there? And find out that we're not spending a whole bunch of dollars on the wrong thing. So that sort of proof of concept is a great opportunity for us to try it and see where it's going to make a difference, then start to replicate that out through the communities. The other thing I did want to mention, this is the last slide, but I did want to say too, when we started this, there's me and Nathan here right now. There could be 30 people standing here. The collaboration in the community to deliver on the submission that was put in was incredible. And it very quickly became less about getting $10 million and more about, we've really became passionate about an opportunity or a problem to be solved in the community. So there's a strong momentum here, and I'm hoping that regardless of how this outcome comes, that this will continue to move forward on that. So that's the end of that. I'll leave you with this. If you're looking for any information, we have a website, smartcitiesniagara.ca, and me and Nathan are open to any questions you may have.
Well, thank you very much, Stuart, and thank you, Nathan. I do see some questions building up, but I just want to remind council that there's no action tonight for us to do this as an information session only. And I just wanted to reiterate what you talked about on your last slide, is that it's not always the destination that's important. In this case, the collaboration, the journey was just as important as the destination and bringing our communities together. So with that, I'll ask Mr. CIO if you want to add some remarks, and then we'll move to our list.
Thank you, Chair, and to Council. I just want to describe to you the exceptional work that Stuart and his team have done in order to bring this to this point. Stuart initially came to the CAO's group. All 13 of us heard the presentation, and we weren't all aligned initially. Stuart then met with each CAO and built that collaboration, got consensus amongst all the CAOs, and then that built to other community partners. And it just accolades to Stuart and his team, how he built this to a consensus point to come and deliver a very collaborative and consensus document. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Joyner.
Thank you, Stuart. Nathan, thank you for the presentation. Stuart, I want to thank you for taking my director of planning away from the township every Thursday. No, just kidding.
Happy to have him there.
I want to go back to the slide of sense of belonging, and I think between you and Nathan, can you put that up there, please, clerks, the sense of belonging?
There you go.
Okay, so actually the one before that where it says the 5 pillars.
Sorry, yeah.
Yes, thank you. Economic inclusion, safety and security, housing, family, school, public space. I'm very curious to know as to why culture and heritage isn't one of those pillars in there, and I'll tell you why. Perhaps maybe you're going to say to me the public space includes culture and heritage. Maybe you will say that, I'm not sure. The reason why I want culture and heritage, or would like to see culture and heritage in there, quite simply is because the Niagara region is a leader in culture and heritage. I don't think anybody can deny that. And that is something that really, to me, is a sense of belonging for all Niagarans, from the west to the east, north to the south. It's a fact that our cultural economic impact study is probably one of the #1 economic cultural studies across Ontario. In actual fact, the Ministry of Culture and Sport uses our Niagara as an example, our Niagara cultural economic impact study as an example when they wrote their own. Is it possible that when you go back to tweak this a little bit, that you might look at that and bring in the fact that culture and heritage plays a big part in the sense of belonging for all of Niagara people? Is that a possibility?
Sure. So I'll quickly, unless you have something you want to chime in with it. No, absolutely. So to this point, these measures here are actually based on existing measures. So things that we can track against and see, are we creating improvement on it? But there's a lot of factors that go into people's sense of belonging, culture, that component of it that contributes to your pride in your community, those pieces as well. So absolutely, they wouldn't be ignored. And as you said, this is our first shot. Once you get to the next round, they're giving you $250,000 to refine that, work through those some more. Absolutely, I think it'd be an area that would include, but I don't know if you have any comments on the data side.
I think on the data side, we would probably look at more of the outcome measures related to culture and heritage instead of the ones that we may address directly through the initiative. Not that we wouldn't take the opportunity if it arises.
Thank you. Councillor Beatty.
Okay, and thank you for the presentation. I think there's two possible endings here. One is the competition itself, but it's also a mirror back to the public at large, that there are things we should be proud of that we're taking for granted or we don't know about at the moment. I was very happy to see MPI, Niagara Prosperity Initiative, included there. I think we've got a track base of a model that's worked extremely well, very focused for a purpose. We have incentivized programs, mentioned culture, heritage specifically, but we got things like community improvement programs, waterfront enhancement programs, et cetera. They're very focused. I looked at the terms about being basically scalable and replicable. And those are the kinds of things that if the public knew about MPI, they could put that in whatever size community they have. If they saw the things like the focused investment that we're doing and looking at basically a 7 to 9 times return on investment, those are the kinds of things that would cause other communities to say, wow, we want to be like Niagara. So again, thank you for the report, and we look forward to, I was going to mention, at our last meeting, we had a very emergent area in terms of, but it could be a model for the future development, and that's the concept of Niagara as a geopark. I think they have some very good ideas that could be replicated in other communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Easton?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. This is really very good report, Stuart, and thank you very much. And certainly our representatives had a terrific time on the committee. So this whole idea of belonging is important to Lincoln because this is part of our vision statement, the sense of belonging. And so I would first say that the first thing that comes to mind is that these, to me, represent very important health indicators. They're all measurable, they're all replicable, as Councillor Beatty has said. So being able to focus on these 5 and any fine tuning that you do, I think from an economic development perspective is going to be very important. However, I wonder what will happen with all of this work if we're not successful. Was there any discussion about what would come next?
So there, as I mentioned at the end, it really did create a lot of passion around this and a lot of momentum, and I think we built a lot of relationships that didn't exist prior to this engagement right across all municipalities and all the different partners. My hope would be that we can keep the momentum, that I can send out the Thursday meeting and have the same people coming out and continuing the conversation. The challenge with any of these sort of initiatives is there are resource constraints, whether those be financial or those be people or whatnot to drive some of these forward. Some of these things we can drive forward without, investment, but some things would take investment to move things forward. My hope would be, regardless of the outcome, that may perhaps we come back and continue these discussions to say how do we move these things forward.
Okay, and through you, Mr. Chairman, Stuart, is there the opportunity for communities to maintain their own identity through this process? Did you talk about that?
Yeah, so through you, Chair, there's a lot of discussion around that, and it was one of the reasons why we landed with what I'd consider a higher level indicator, such as sense of belonging, that have other elements to it. We actually don't have a visual for it, but it's almost a bit of a matrix model. When you look at this concept here that we've kind of got the life course model, where you start to indicate or start to see there's some real dips around what we call sort of transitions in life, so we seem to be knocking it out of the park with the kids, and then something happens, and we really see that sense of belonging dip. It's in the stats there and other ones as well. Having that sort of matrix-based model where we can look at life course and kind of couple that with these areas allows each community to kind of say, where do we see ourselves in this? And where can we move the dials under some of these different categories? It also fits in with our ask around looking for the acquisition of additional data to get more granular at the community level, even beyond the municipal borders, but the communities within the communities, to get that granularity to be able to say, what does that look like? You might find that, this map here looks different for Lincoln than it does for Fort Erie or some other thing. So we need to get to that level of granularity, and that's one of the things we intend to use, or our proposal is to use out of the $250,000 is that additional data to help drive those conversations.
Right. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm also interested in knowing how you landed on this particular indice.
So it really came out of the conversations with all the different partners. There was a lot of ideas floated around, with a key deliverable being that it must be measurable, it must have a baseline, and the whole intent of this actual competition is they're really expecting you to spend whatever you're awarded within about a 2 or 3 year window, and then they want you to measure benefits up to 10 years. That's the course of it. So a lot of measures were brought forward in a lot of different areas, not just sense of belonging, but this was the one that just really resonated with the team, and sort of rolled forward with it. It's a Canadian index. I mean, that's part of it. I'd say it's a Canadian index. We have measures right across the board. were able to identify best in class. So it's, for us, it was one that we could action.
Well, Mr. Chairman, it's a very exciting potential, no question about it. I certainly, I believe we will be successful. I think this is really at such a high level that the impact will be so great in terms of how other people can utilize this that we can't be anything but successful. So
The whole
we
team
look
feels that
forward.
way.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Naziata?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through the presenter. Thank you, Stuart, for all your hard work on this. Specifically to your presentation, leveraging data and technology. Can you give me an example what a Niagara Innovation Neighborhood looks like?
Yeah, so that's actually so the Innovation Neighborhood, that's actually the work that, I don't know if you're familiar with the Spark, so Spark Niagara, there's a Spark Lincoln as well. But really it's looking at communities themselves, areas within the community, and turning them into a bit of an innovation ecosystem. So creating a co-work space, the incubator space, providing services to startups, providing collaboration opportunities between startups, to really kind of create those little mini, those mini innovation areas within communities. And I know part of that thought process too is to kind of take that opportunity and also move those into what you might not necessarily think is the primary areas, and not necessarily the downtown core, but maybe a little bit off to the side to try and build up a little bit of economic development in those areas as well.
Thank you for that answer. So obviously, is there a template that we could see? Because I'm really curious and really fascinated by that whole idea. And what pops into my head right off the bat is probably Kitchener, Waterloo, possibly.
It's that sort of model.
That sort of model. So it's more of an urbanized kind of concept rather than, I mean, knowing that Niagara, there's a lot of rural, but this is more or less more urbanized areas.
Yes. Yeah, primarily. Although that said, arguably, I mean, they just opened up Spark Lincoln, which is quasi-rural, quasi-urban. And that's what that one's specifically referring to. But yeah, I'm happy to share the documentation that they have, and there is some models around that as well. And our hope is to expand on that. A lot of the model around that too is around youth retention. So creating the ecosystem to retain our youth as well, creating the jobs, giving them the opportunities to get the experience, the skills, and stay in Niagara as well.
Well, I appreciate those answers. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Augustine?
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. Thanks for the presentation. We heard that this is a competition, and our template is now public and it's on our open data site. So conceivably, others that have submitted have put theirs online and made it public. So what's the competition? What are they doing with their submissions?
So so you're right. So our application, one of the requirements once we were told that we were compliant and that we met all the requirements of it, one of the next obligations is to put your application out on the website. So we're in the process of doing it. It's there now. We're still tweaking it. But by mid-May, the expectation is that everyone's websites will be up with the application. And at Infrastructure Canada, there'll actually be a site that lists everyone who submitted, what their challenge statement, which was a requirement, and a summary of what their project is. So within a couple of weeks, we'll actually be able to see everyone's. The only ones I was really aware were the ones that were as active as us in the engagement side of it. So there was some stuff being done by Mississauga. There were some things being done by Calgary, Edmonton, Vancouver, South Vancouver Island. Interesting enough, though, in the sort of engagement stage of it, there wasn't a lot of people really kind of bubbling up to the top. But I suspect there could be hundreds of applications.
Right.
So in a couple of weeks, we'll know what they all are, and we'll know exactly what they're working on. And that's the spirit of this competition. It's kind of locked down now, but now everyone's ideas will be out there, and the hope is that it spurs more ideas in different communities to try things.
Well, that's the point. Thank you very much. That's the point I was hoping to get to, that this may be our submission, but maybe we can learn from others. So I'm hopeful, Mr. Chair, that we'll also get a little bit of a summary on what other communities are doing, and maybe it's something that we can add to ours as we get to the next phase, or something that we consider in future years should the project go ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Rigby?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and just want to thank you again. I'm sure we're very, all of us are very pleased with what is going on and transpiring. And certainly it's great to see the number of, first of all our 12 plus the region municipalities working together, but also the collaborative application that you've brought forward as well. And just as Councillor Joyner has brought forward on our heritage and art. When you're looking at that, which you've said, yes, that certainly is worthy to look at. I have to throw in sport and recreation, and take in mind, I think, the Canada Games and what that's going to mean for this whole community as we go forward, if you haven't already, and I would just hope that you have.
Yeah, actually, sports and recreation was something that's been identified as a measure. Participation in that as contributing to a sense of belonging as well. And our challenge through this process is to collect that data and be able to measure that data going forward.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Stuart and Nathan, for your effort. How about a round of applause for your effort? Great job. Thank you very much. Moving on to the chair's reports, announcements, and remarks. I want to start by welcoming the Wainfleet interim mayor, Betty Conk. This is Betty's first meeting here as interim mayor of Wainfleet. Welcome, Betty. On Monday, I had a chance to join Niagara's Navy Association here at the Niagara Regional Headquarters to announce Navy Week 2018. We raised the Royal Canadian Navy flag to honor the 4,600 men and women that served our nation in the Battle of the Atlantic. We recognize the bravery, dedication, and accomplishments of those who fought for our country, and their sacrifices do not go unnoticed. The National Day of Mourning was on Saturday, which was last Saturday, April the 28th, and we had an opportunity to gather as a community to commemorate the National Day of Mourning, to remember the workers who have died, suffered injury, or illness on the job. This day is a reminder of our commitment to improve health and safety in the workplace and prevent further injuries, illness, and deaths. I would like to thank the Niagara Regional Labor Council for their efforts in organizing the 10 ceremonies across the Niagara region that took place on Saturday, ending in the last flag raising here at the headquarters. Last week, I had a chance to meet with the provincial opposition leader, Doug Ford, and with Niagara regional representatives met with senior policy staff from his office and walked them through the Niagara Go business case. Following this discussion, they confirmed that Doug Ford is fully committed to bringing GO Transit to Niagara if he forms government in June. That said, we'll continue to work with all three parties to make sure that this remains a top priority at Queen's Park. Those are my remarks for today, and I'll ask if we could then move on to delegations. Yes?
Sorry, Chair, I was a little bit late. I would like to take the opportunity to declare a conflict of interest with the DC issues that are on the agenda this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, please let that be noted. Okay, moving on to delegations. I'm going to invite Niagara Lake Town Councillor Pielo Mile to the podium for a delegation on traffic concerns on 4 Mile Creek Road, but I'll ask if we could please have our Commissioner of Public Works, Ron Trips, please set some context.
Thank you, Chair. As already indicated, PW9 2018 has been brought forward in the agenda just following the delegation. That report, as well as the predecessor, a memorandum, CWCD 96 2018, referenced in that report, provides a fair bit of background, describes essentially the accident experience that we've had out at this location, but also a number of things that have been reviewed and or implemented over the last 2 years, as well as speaks to other safety measures that we're contemplating or reviewing implementation in the near future. So those reports speak to themselves, and we'll hear more from the delegation. I really wanted to make a committee aware that based on the discussion that took place at Public Works Committee and the recommendation that was carried, we have actually retained a consultant to do a comprehensive review, a consultant that is acknowledged as a subject matter expert in this area across Ontario, to do a comprehensive review and consider all possible safety measures, the spectrum. That, as I said, has been actioned this week. Direction from committee was to come back in one cycle. It can't be completed that quickly. We are targeting the June meeting of Public Works Committee to bring back that report and any further recommendations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. So we will be dealing with that minute item from the Public Works meeting after the delegation. So with that, Mr. Millet, please continue. Welcome.
Thank you, and good evening, Chair, mayors of the region, members of council, senior staff, and Mr. CAO. I'm here this evening to fully support the proposal and the motion that Niagara-on-the-Lake Council has endorsed unanimously to the region, requesting a four-way stop at Line 3 and Creek Road. As we're all aware, this has been a pretty serious intersection for the last number of years, specifically the last 5 years. We have a report here from Inspector Jim McCaffrey of the Niagara Regional Police. I know in the Public Works report, it was recommended or suggested that there was 14, but in fact, in an email that I have received from Inspector McCaffrey, there was 28 in the last 5 years, and there was 2 this year that had occurred, so there was 5 so far. It is a unique intersection. Of course, we don't know fully how the accidents are occurring, but they are occurring, and tourist season is coming upon us, and we really need to ensure that this intersection has no more accidents, or at least minimize it. To have 28 collisions, and 1 was a fatality within the number of years as well. The last one was airlifted, person from out of state, out of province, I believe, sorry. So I'm looking to the region and the council to support a four-way stop. And I understand that there was talk of a review within a year. And we're fine with that. We're not saying, you know, we're going to change our minds. Obviously, the region is going to have its engineers come out. Commissioner Tripp will hopefully be part of this as well, and the community. And so if it is working, it stays. If it doesn't work, then we have to look for a further solution, and that will leave to the region. But in the meantime, we're looking to stop the collisions at Line 3 and Creek Road. I know Niagara-on-the-Lake has other areas that are of concern as well. Line 4 and 55, Airport Road and Niagara Stone Road, Lakeshore Road is also a concern. And of course, there are seasons within Niagara-on-the-Lake. There are tourists that are coming into Niagara-on-the-Lake, and so there are more collisions when that occurs. But in the meantime, we're having locals and out-of-towners having these collisions at Line 3 and Creek Road. So at the end of this, I'm here today to ask you to please support the four-way stop that Niagara-on-the-Lake Town Council has unanimously is requesting this region tonight. And I know our members of region here tonight, Regional Chair, Councillor Burrows and Lord Mayor Dart, of course, and the rest of the mayors and councillors here tonight to support Niagara-on-the-Lake. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Millet. There may be some questions. The speakers list is open if there are any. We are going to be dealing with the item brought forward by Councillor Dart after the delegation. Councillor Augustine.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the presentation. The question is simply, can we have that report? Perhaps the clerk can have it from Inspector McCafferty. Don't give it to me. Well, give it to me and I'll pass along to the clerk. But I think it's important for all council.
I've got a number of copies.
Yeah, perfect.
I'll make sure that everybody gets it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Seeing no more questions, I'll ask if you could perhaps the general manager can grab that from you. Oh, one more question, Councillor Burrows.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Paolo, for coming forward tonight.
Thank you,
I know it's of interest to all of us in Niagara-on-the-Lake, and I think you raised a good point, and we spent some time at Public Works discussing, well, if we put it in, it'll never come out. It's like every other sign. It'll come out if it should come out, and I don't think that should have been part of the decision. So as you know, the region will be coming back with an updated report. I think they're acting very quickly, and certainly I'm hoping that we move to a stop sign sooner than that.
Thank you. And to that, if I may, Councillor Burrows, I know your CIO has been wonderful in working, answering my emails and my questions. I know yourself, Lord Mayor Dart, and other members of regional staff. And so to this, my first time here at regional office,
It's a
I had
great
no other
place.
reason, but I'm here to support fellow councilors. Thank you.
Thank you. Couple more questions, Mr. Mealy. Councillor Maves?
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Paula, for being here in your presentation. I was chair of the committee, so I listened to.
Councillor?
Sorry, I realize I'm at regional council. So I listened intently to everyone, and one of the concerns, being familiar with the intersection myself, one of the things that I've asked staff to look into is there's actually two things. One was the fact that they have these hydro poles, and it doesn't make sense to most people when you think of a hydro pole being in the way, but I've been at that intersection waiting to go on to 4 Mile Creek Road, and there's hydro poles that are actually strangely perfectly in the view. I wonder if you had any thoughts on that.
There's two brand new hydro poles laying on either side of the ground. I think Lord Mayor Dart will speak to that.
Okay, that's one question I had. The other question I had was, some of the councillors were concerned that once the stop signs go in, they're not coming out. Even though the report did say that they were in term for 1 year, we check on the impacts. The one concern I had, being my kid played hockey down there, and I frequented that road all the time, and as an MPP from Niagara Lake, I'm there frequently. For 100 years, there hasn't been a stop sign on that road, and I'm worried that locals won't even register that, oh, there's a stop sign now on this street, and will actually maybe increase the amount of collisions because they'll just go flying through those stop signs when it's a four-way stop on line 3. I'm just wondering if you had any thoughts on that.
And you're right. Human behavior, if you're traveling on a certain road each and every day, and you're just going through the motions. But we have had four-way stops installed in Niagara-on-the-Lake, and there was a learning curve. And of course, with law enforcement, prepared to be there to ensure that the speed limits are there, people are stopping at the stop signs. And I believe that it is going to be a learning curve. I'm sure that there will be people that may go through the four-way stop because they don't recognize that it's there yet. But with fair warning and education, like everything else, those local residents specifically will have the opportunity, and through social media, of course, I'll be probably the loudest one out there in Niagara-on-the-Lake saying there's a four-way stop. But I think with education and law enforcement, we'll be okay.
Question.
Thank you.
I know that the town council voted to have this four-way stop and request of the region. Was it unanimous?
Yeah, it was.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dart.
Thank you, Chair. Just, I'll speak just to the delegation for a moment, and thank you, Councillor Mealy, for coming and speaking. A couple of things, and I don't know if you want me to address them now, things that Councillor Maves has brought up and things. I can address it now. As far as locals go, the consideration is the thought process is that might very well happen. I think with education and probably some very large, bold signage, at least temporarily, extremely dangerous intersection ahead or something like that, it'll just be something to trigger them. I think most of our drivers are well aware that it's been a problem intersection, and unless we do something about it, probably almost everybody's had or known somebody that has been in an accident there. So it's been talked about extensively around town. The hydro poles, we spoke with our hydro company on Monday, and they are looking into moving those poles. And as Councillor Mealy said, there's 2 new poles there. I'm assuming that's what it's for. So those poles will be moved, and that portion will be taken care of too. The rest I can speak to after if you want, but I've talked extensively to Commissioner Tripp about the whole thing. You want to be a councillor now? Or? No. It's an election year. It's open. So we've investigated all of these things. So the fact that it's a consideration and a temporary one, again, the word temporary was used for that express reason. So thank you. And thank you very much for bringing it.
Lord Mayor.
Councillor Joyner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Council, thank you so much for the presentation. I will be supporting this. I will be supporting this quite simply because, as you know, West Lincoln and Niagara-on-the-Lake are very much similar. We both have a lot of high collision intersections, and unfortunately, we have a lot of fatalities in both your municipality and my municipality. I wait with bated breath for this process to unfold because quite simply, I have a lot of intersections like you do in Niagara-on-the-Lake where there are two-way stops and there's a high volume of traffic going the other way. I've been told repeatedly that that has to stay a status quo. So for that reason, I will very much be looking to see how this process unfolds here in Niagara-on-Lake. And I want to say right now for regional staff ears that I will be addressing our high collision intersections with four-way stops too as well, namely Regional Road 14, Smithville Road, Port Davidson, and Regional Road 65. Very, very dangerous. We've gone through all of the safety features that you can put into a high collision intersection. The larger stop signs, the beacons on the top of the stop signs, the chevrons underneath the stop signs, the rumble strips leading up to the stop signs. We've gone through the gamma of this. Our residents have been asking for four-way stops, and I have to keep telling them over and over and over again that the region does not see that as being a viable alternative. So I'll be waiting with bated breath to see what happens. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Miele, and we'll be dealing with the item now. You may want to
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Public Works minute item 5.2, which is PW 9 2018, had 4 items on it. If I could please have it put on the screen. The first item was dealing with the four-way stop. A second item dealing with the speed limit reduction. Third item dealing with paint on the road, and the fourth item being the bylaw. So the first item was in fact deferred by the Public Works meeting until the Public Works Committee meeting of May 15th. Is Councillor Dart?
My name's not coming up, but I'll speak anyway. Thank you. So just a little bit further on this situation. It's so imperative. I mean, we've been lucky to date. I've driven by, I don't know, countless accidents that I've seen myself. Some very severe. Some it was a car that was rolled over. I have no idea how this man walked out of it. He crawled out of his car, and luckily. But the last one, someone was airlifted. We haven't heard of their condition at this point in time. But to defer this or delay this any longer just gives us that much more time for the worst case scenario. And I don't think to put in a four-way stop is not expensive, and it's definitely worth the cost of one life if we can save it. And I mean, I'm not trying to create any panic or anything. It's a very real situation. So I will indulge and ask council tonight to. I'm going to lift motion, and I'll ask council to vote on it tonight, PW 9, 2018. If we could have that lifted and voted on tonight, Chair.
So it is on the screen, and you have the ability to approve what's on the screen, which is the original recommendation of staff.
Well, the last 3 have already been okayed, so they've been carried.
They were carried. The first one was deferred, but if you approve it as it's on the screen.
Yeah, I think we're fine with all of that. I was instructed by our council unanimously to come and it says in the motion to demand, but I think request would be, it does say demand, but I'll tame that down a bit, but that was the actual motion, that four-way stop be put in immediately, not deferred, and we need to have that right now. Councillor Burrows and I have spoken on this a number of times also. So I guess, and again, to what Councillor Joyner had said, Niagara-on-the-Lake, we know what we need. We've seen it all the time. We have witnessed it, and we know what we need. So please indulge us in this one. Take a look at any other intersections that could save lives. If for a minor adjustment, it's a four-way stop at this point. And once the report comes back from Commissioner Tripp, then we can reevaluate it. But I will ask that tonight. Thank you.
Councillor Burrows, would you like to second that? So what I'll accept then is the motion that's before you, which is the staff recommendations, which then supersedes the deferral that was made by the committee. And so we're speaking to the motion on the floor with as it stands. Councillor Timms.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the clarity on the process here, but we passed in committee that it be deferred, and this is what we're going to be voting on now. So
Correct.
what happened, the committee is
correct.
Irrelevant. Okay. So I'd ask a question to you, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Tripp. The discrepancy in the number of accidents that Councillor Miele pointed out to us. There's a difference in the description or category of accident, went from 14 to 28. Could you help us with that, please?
Thank you, Chair. We're still trying to actually understand exactly the discrepancy, but I would suggest it has to do with the years of documentation, whether or not the accidents were at exactly the intersection or close to the intersection, or also the number of vehicles, whether they've been double counted for the. Regardless, we acknowledge that there's a high accident experience there, but we are trying to determine or come to an agreement between NRPS data, the town's data, and the region's data in terms of the actual number. But the three things that I referenced, I think, play into the discrepancy.
So the clarification on that issue would come to us if we defer and wait, I guess it'll be 6 weeks before we made the decision.
Through you, Chair, as I had indicated earlier, we are coming back to Public Works Committee in June for the June meeting with a report on this comprehensive review, irrespective of the decision of council tonight.
Okay. And the second question, I'm aware of the locals being surprised by a stop sign or not even blowing through it a couple of times before they realized that it's there. But I have seen a number of measures taken to inform with huge signs about new stop sign ahead. And the other action has been the rumble strips you install approaching the intersection that wakes everybody up. And they only need to be in place for a couple of years and then they're usually taken out because of the residents nearby get tired of hearing it. What's your assessment of those two ways of addressing the concern about the locals being surprised by the stop sign?
Through you, Chair, I would not recommend the rumble strips at this point in time because they are more than just the residents getting tired of them. They are quite disruptive. Should us always stop be approved, we would do advanced signage as we normally would. We call it the starburst, very eye-catching signage, as well as supported by both conventional and social media. We have better tools now on that front in terms of getting message out. I have no doubt, actually, as the town councillor had indicated, that he's going to lead that charge as well, but we wouldn't rely on that. We'd have our own awareness and education campaign associated with it.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Redekop?
Chair, I must say I'm greatly persuaded by the demands or the requests of a local municipality. They do know this intersection better than anyone else. But I had a couple of questions. The first one was, what is it the committee is going to be receiving in June with respect to this?
Thank you. Commissioner?
Through you, Chair, a comprehensive review from an external consultant, and I referenced an acknowledged expert in this particular area, looking at the spectrum of options, including evaluating the ones that we have implemented, may implement as per tonight, and any further options. There was a discussion, actually, a committee of a roundabout as a potential option. We're going to evaluate that as well. Looking at what the current state is in terms of accident history, current state in terms of traffic counts, and projections from our transportation master plan where we expect traffic counts to be in the future.
So I guess putting the best face on that, that's in the event the four-way stop doesn't prove to be adequate?
Commissioner?
I'm not sure if I understood the question exactly. Should a four-way stop be implemented this evening or approved this evening, we had committed to come back with a review a year from now in terms of any consequential impact on adjacent roads or in the vicinity. That would still be coming, but the evaluation that I referenced to come back in June will provide an assessment of the all-way stop relative to other options that might be available. I'm not sure if that got to the question.
My recollection, Mr. Chair, was that during the committee meeting, the reason we would have a consultant do a further report and make some recommendations was because we weren't necessarily convinced that the four-way stop was what was the answer. And if this passes, I don't know that we need to have a consultant do a report immediately, number one, and number two, I don't know that we need to have a specific review a year from now. My view is that the four-way stop goes in, the four-way stop stays. The only reason it would change would be if there's a need for some higher level of traffic control. So I wonder if the mayor or the regional council could comment, maybe the mayor, because he's got the feel of the local council with respect to this issue. The question being, should it be a one-year temporary implementation of a four-way stop, or should it just be four-way stop?
Mr. Mayor?
Thank you, Chair, through you. As far as the council goes, we need to have this dealt with immediately. If it goes for consultation and everything else, it's going to delay it longer. To your very clear question, I'd like to say that if there's a better option, then that's fine. I don't know what the cost of the consultant is or the time deferral. I don't know where 1 year came from anyway, so we may find out in 3 or 4 months that it does work or it doesn't work. So I don't know why 1 year was set, but if that's what it is. As far as, and again, I'll speak to the flavor of council, we just want it fixed now. However, and it gets done. The only thing that was ever, at that time, at the time of the council meeting, the only thing that was offered to us was a four-way stop. So if there's a better method, that's fine. I don't think the four-way stop is going to cost a whole lot to put in the short term.
Mr. Chair, if I just my understanding from the meeting, the committee meeting, was that it would be very expensive to put in traffic signaling, and that the traffic counts didn't warrant it. Is that correct? And then the other alternative, which was the roundabout, would be very, very expensive. So I don't think that Niagara-on-the-Lake is asking for a very expensive solution. They just want a solution, and the first solution is a four-way stop, which I think, if properly implemented, would absolutely resolve the matter. So I'm reluctant to suggest that we need to have a consultant's report so soon after we implement this. And I guess we can leave in the words interim, but I don't think we should fool anybody. The four-way stop goes in, those stop signs are staying.
Thank you. Councillor Rigby.
Mr. Chair, and just on procedure, item 1 was deferred.
Correct.
And in the past, when we've had that, we would lift that item 1 and re-vote on this council. And if that changes the vote from being deferred to put it in place in the level. And I think that's what we should be doing presently for clarity. And secondly, the motion that we have here is not appointing a professional to look at it at this point. That is something that our commissioner is suggesting they want to do for further, and it may also impact the previous item on the agenda, which we're not discussing. So I think we need to deal with item 1, lift it and vote on it. As it is now, there's a motion to defer because it's now council making the decision, and you either vote to defer it or approve it or change it. And I believe that's how we've always done that. Now, unless we've changed our rules, and I'll ask you to make that ruling.
So I asked the clerk for information before I did what I did. So the clerk suggested that, and why don't I get you to just repeat it?
Through you, Chair. Councillor Dart put the motion on the floor as it was, so it's not the actual item that was coming from the committee minutes.
Then I shouldn't have this up. This is not the motion that's on our screen then.
Madam Clerk?
The motion that's on your screen is what Councillor Dart put on in lieu of what came out of committee.
It repeats what was in the committee, basically.
Madam Clerk?
I understand what you're saying, but I don't know that that's clear. But if that's your ruling, I'll accept it. But I think you have in place a motion from committee that deferred this. And the only way I've seen us change that is for council to vote on that item, and I'll leave it at that. But I think that may not be the way we should be doing it. Thank you.
I have to take the clerk's advice. Councillor D'Angelo?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was going to rise on that same point there. It sort of makes no sense coming out of committee with a recommendation, coming here, and then any councillor could change that recommendation from that committee. It absolutely makes no sense.
We
So
do
that's-
often, but I'll ask the clerk for clarity again if you like.
I'm not questioning the ruling. If that's the ruling, that's the ruling. I think that's got to be referred back to a procedural committee so that it gets corrected, because really, you're putting the committee's time and value into making a decision and saying, wow, just throw us something up here at council, and then if we like it, we'll accept it. If we don't, I'll change it. It doesn't make sense. It's procedurally, it sounds bizarre. But I'm not challenging the ruling. We'll move forward with the ruling. I have no problem with putting a stop sign there. That's what Niagara on the Lake wants. That's we'll move forward on that. But that issue will come up again. It'll be a bit more contentious on something else because whoever, like, how about if I wanted to put a different motion on the floor? But anyways, that was one point. The second point then is, to me, I don't see the need of coming back with a report within a couple months at this point in time for a consultant's report, and then come back a year from now with another consultant's report to outline some of the benefits or what's happening with this intersection. I would defer that first report for a year, let it go through a whole season, a whole year, so you can get some data, you can see if there's some collisions, you can see if it's working, you can get some feedback from the residents, then come back at that time. There's no use doing work 3 months from now and then doing the similar work 9 months from now, because there's always a cost of doing work. And it doesn't make a lot of sense in my mind. I know it's a Niagara on the Lake issue, but I'll support them putting the stop sign there. But I think if they're agreeable, I think you should put an amendment in here that a report come back a year from now to determine if it's working to the adequacy of their community, and if there's any better solutions at that point in time, or any altercations that can be done to enhance the safety in their community, I think would make a lot more sense.
Commissioner, do you want to comment on the status of your request?
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the consulting work, as I have indicated, that has been, the procurement has been executed already. In terms of the timeliness of coming back, I'm trying to be, I guess, mindful of the spirit of the dialogue at the time, where the Public Works Committee wanted to know all options that are available to them. That's still relevant to come back in a short period of time. I acknowledge the point of the councillor. We could just come back in a year with the same information. So perhaps I'll discuss that with the Public Works Chair further, and we can see a way forward. There wasn't a comment about not doing the study at all, and I would recommend, in fact, it's been initiated already, that we do the study, because it's going to have utility at this location, and it may also have utility at other locations in the region in terms of options available to us.
Thank you. Councillor? Okay, Councillor Joyner?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess maybe at this time I'll be asking the clerk if we can't separate all four of these different motions. In that way, if we choose as council to defer it, the councillors who want to defer it could. The ones who believe that Niagara on Lake should have that stop sign now will be able to have that. I will be
Councillor,
speaking.
just for clarity, can we just do then point 1 and then bullets 2 through 4?
Yes, you're right, Mr. Chair. Thank you for that clarification. I will be voting for a deferral on number 1, and I will be voting for a deferral on number 1 for the same reason why I voted for it at committee. I'm looking at this from a legal risk management point of view. If there is no warrants justifying that there be a four-way stop, and there is an accident there, and we've implemented a four-way stop, from a risk management point of view, a good lawyer will say there was no warrant to have a four-way stop there, and the Niagara region will be on the hook. That is why I wish for this consultant to come forward and actually give us the proper geometrics and the proper flow and all of the safety measures that they're going to look at into this intersection to determine whether it be a four-way stop or a two-way stop. We absolutely need a consultant's professional opinion on these types of intersection. I truly believe that. If Commissioner Tripp feels that he can bring that report back in June, we can have a stop sign at that intersection if it warrants and council agrees to it by July. That would be the height of the tourism season. I think we're actually just moving this. We deferred it for a reason at committee. I think we're just moving just a little bit too fast just to say it should be a four-way stop at this point in time. Thank you.
Thank you. No. Councilor Burrows.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for allowing me to speak a second time. It's just on the review down a year. I think it would be good public policy for all issues of road changes, and we have many in Niagara-on-the-Lake, and I'm sure we do throughout the region, that a year after the fact, we should be reviewing it. What was the intent of the change? Did the change work? What are the stats before and after? So I think there's too much emphasis on coming back to it. I think all projects should come back for a postmortem. So I just wanted to say that.
Thank you. Councilor Augustine?
Thanks very, very much, Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry?
Did. But I just wanted to say the lawyers on our side disagree with the lawyers on the other side.
Thank you. Councilor?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. First, a question, then a comment. I know of an intersection in Niagara, Regional Road 50 and Regional Road 41, that had in the past something called high collision intersection ahead. It was a yellow sign. I found it on Google Maps from years ago, but it doesn't appear to be there now. Do we do that anymore, and have staff considered that yellow chevron, whatever, or yellow sign?
Commissioner?
Through Chair, I can say that we don't do it anymore. I know that it was a program a number of years ago, and I'm actually not sure of the background as to why it discontinued, but I'd have to follow that up.
Okay, that may be helpful if, now I can see the lawyers saying if we acknowledge that it's a high collision intersection ahead, then there must be something wrong with it or something. But just to the final comment about the lawyer, I disagree with Councillor Joyner, because I think if we as a council are in full knowledge that there are this many accidents at this intersection, and we don't do something, we're liable. There could be an accident tonight at midnight. There could be an accident tomorrow. And if I was a fancy lawyer, like Councillor Redekop, I would take it to, take the full case and assist. And the reason you do that is to assist the individual and their family. So I think it's incumbent on us, Mr. Chair, and colleagues, to take some action. And I will be supporting number one, not a deferral. Let's take the action that the municipality unanimously requested and many, many residents in that area want. Thank you.
Thank you. So seeing no more speakers, we're going to call on item number 1 first and then 2 through 4. So for item number 1, I'm going to ask to use the buttons. Recorded vote has been requested. Well, it's what's on the screen. Yes, you're agreeing with what's on the screen, or no, you're not. Yes?
Just on clarification, so we're voting yes or no.
Correct.
If it's yes, we're going ahead with this.
Correct.
Motion. If it's no, what have we done?
We're not putting stop signs in.
You're going back to the original motion?
This item, this minute item now supersedes what committee did. Think of it that way. So this is now the committee
So
item.
you're rejecting that motion,
That's
that
correct.
part, so what the committee did previously would take in effect.
Correct.
All right.
Okay. All right, please open the vote when you're ready. Item number 1 only.
Vote is open.
And the vote carries. Thank you. Item number, sorry. Okay. If we could take that out, that would be great. Thank you. Now, items 2 through 4, we'll use the buttons again just to be consistent. Please go ahead.
The vote is open.
And that passes unanimously. Thank you very much for that. Thank you, Mr. Miele, for your presentation tonight. And moving on, we'll move on to the adoption of the minutes. Sir?
Mr. Chair.
Mayor Sedgwick?
Just a quick question. In terms of, is there a way that we can get the bylaw approved tonight, or do we have to wait for another cycle?
No, we have the bylaw prepared from
Thank you.
last meeting.
Thank you.
That is ready. The new bylaw ready, thank you. So, Councillor Timms? I'll call on you for council minutes CL5 2018.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move, and seconded by Councillor Joyner, that minutes CL5 2018, being the open session minutes of the Regional Council meeting held on Thursday, April 12th, 2018, be adopted.
Thank you. Questions or comments? Councillor Height?
Yes, through the staff or to you, Chair, have we heard from ADR Chambers? Do we have any kind of time frame? What's going on with them? Have they come to town?
Well, certainly not through me, because
Well,
I'm
then-
to stay at arm's length.
Okay,
but
then through the staff, have we heard from ADR and do we have any kind of time frame?
Madam Clerk?
Through you, Chair, I have been in contact with them. They are agreeable to meet the June deadline that council set, so we're working towards that.
Thank you. Seeing no more questions, all those in favor? Opposed, if any? And that carries. Thank you. I'll turn now to correspondence, which there is none. Committee reports, open session committee reports. I'll call on Councillor Quirk for Audit Committee.
Thank you, Chair. I have a motion moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Maloney, that report AC 3 2018 being the open session minutes of the Audit Committee meeting held on Tuesday, April 10th, 2018 be received and the recommendations contained therein be approved.
Thank you. Questions or comments? Councillor Burrows? Oh, Councillor Augustine first. Councillor Burrows.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and that was my first audit committee meeting, and I just want to say, as I did at that meeting, I want to congratulate staff for how well-written the reports were, how in-depth they were, and it was obviously had a great understanding of the issues that we were dealing with.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Shea. Councillor Augustine?
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. Part of the audit committee, I agree with Councillor Burrows, but part of the audit committee dealt with an update of the Burgoyne Bridge and the changes that are to occur as a result of the things that we learned through that process. The report, Mr. Chair, says that 5 of those 8 items are in progress, 2 were on hold, and only 1 is fully implemented, and we're more than a year past the time that we received the Burgoyne Bridge report. Now, I did ask in committee about this, and staff indicated that there was 1 that moved from on hold into in progress, and I had thought that that would change in the report, and I don't see that change in the report, and then it would be ready here for council. Obviously, we would all hope that these would be fully implemented as quickly as possible. You know, it's obviously an important factor, and there are significant things that we should be learning from this. Even things like develop a structured estimating process to allow for accurate monitoring, control, forecasting, and reporting of project costs related to the Burgoyne Bridge. That was one that concerns me. That obviously needs to be done, and that was on hold. Mr. Chair, can we have assurances that this will be clarified and rectified and acted upon very quickly?
So I have a choice to go to Chair Quirk or Director Jurczyk. Would you like to comment first, Chair?
Thank you. Through you to Councillor Augustine, very valid points and one of the questions that came up with respect to the report. The councillor will recall that that report is actually a quarter behind because we didn't get quorum at our audit committee meeting, so we moved it forward. So we actually have an audit committee meeting on Monday, and I was just seeing if the agenda had been posted. That very report with the change from last quarter to this quarter is to be on that agenda, so that will answer it and have those various issues identified and moved up forward. So it'll be on for discussion on Monday at audit committee meeting.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Obviously of significant concern to the community and also to the task force that's working on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no more questions, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? And that carries. Thank you. Now I'll call on Councillor Mabes for the Public Works Committee minutes.
Chair, do I alter this to say I'm moving the balance of the Public Works Committee?
The balance of the Public Works, thank you.
Okay, so moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Rigby, that report PWC, the balance of report PWC 6, 2018 being an open session minutes of the Public Works Committee meeting held on Tuesday, April 24th, 2018, be received and the recommendations contained therein be approved.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed, if any? And that carries. Now I'll call on Councillor Joyner for Public Health and Social Services Committee minutes. Councillor Timms?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I need a seconder, as I seconded
I think we got Councillor Rigby.
Councillor Joyner. So I move and seconded by Councillor Rigby that report PHSC 6, 2018 being the open session minutes of the Public Health and Social Services Committee meeting held on Tuesday, April 24th, 2018 be received and the recommendations contained therein be approved.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? And that carries. Councillor Rigby, would you like to go over and sign the minutes? With that, thank you. I'll call on Councillor Grenier for the Corporate Services Committee minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Myself and seconded by Councillor Ken. Report CSC 6, 2018 being the open and closed session minutes for the Corporate Services Committee held Wednesday, April 25th, 2018 be received and the recommendations contained therein be approved, save except minute item 9.4, which will be dealt with following the closed session, agenda item 17 of this meeting.
Thank you very much. Councillor Timms.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I hope my seconding that motion is in order given the conflict of interest or declaration I had made earlier. And secondly, just a minor correction in the minutes. I think I sent an email to the acting clerk under other business 7.1 and 7.2.
Yep.
It's on page 2011. The paragraph 7.2 is proper. 7.1.
Yep.
The paragraph is kind of misrepresenting. I was asking for, as the title suggested, and perhaps Ms. Nario can
Madam Clerk?
correct the record.
Through you, Chair, I have corrected the record to reflect your proper request regarding the diversity training,
Oh, and I have the print copy and
which was printed prior, yes.
perfect, and it's all corrected and my seconding the motion is great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? And that carries. Now I'll call on Councillor Volpatti for Planning and Economic Development Committee.
Thank you, Chair. I have a motion moved by me, seconded by Councillor Maloney, that report PEDC 6-2018 being the open session minutes of the Planning and Economic Development Committee meeting held on Wednesday, April 25, 2018 be received, and the recommendations contained therein be approved.
Thank you. Questions or comments? Councillor Quirk.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to rise to echo my comments that I made at Planning Committee. One of the motions in here is the secondary plan approval for the regional official plan amendment for the Go Hubs area of study in Grimsby. And I wanted to again express my appreciation to the staff that put this all together and Dillon Consulting for the work they did to come up with the excellent document that you see in front of it, as well as for the work that Reno and his department did in making sure that the concerns that were heard in Grimsby were recognized with this plan. This is a plan that's going to take us forward over the next 20 and 30 years as we see the growth that Go is going to bring, especially hitting Grimsby first. And so on behalf of myself and Councillor Bentley, thank you for all the work that was done on this.
Excellent. Thank you. Councillor Augustine.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. I'm wondering if we can lift minute item 5.5 for separate consideration. This is the matter dealing with the Niagara Escarpment Commission and a redevelopment. I was opposed to this in committee. I didn't call for a recorded vote there.
Can you give me the number one more time?
I'm sorry, it's 5.5 PDS 20.
5.5. Okay.
And just so that we can vote on it separately, Mr. Chair. I'm not in favor of this. It's leading to the potential for an urban boundary expansion of which I am not in favor, and I've been consistently not in favor of that, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so we'll vote on that one first then.
Thank you.
I'll call it.
Should stand. Actually, could I get some context on this from from the commissioner? I don't attend. I read this and followed the media reports and debate. I thought that there was pretty much consensus from committee. Now that we're going to debate it here, I think that for those that are watching and are about to participate that weren't at planning, maybe the commissioner could provide a bit of context as why the CANF had to make this application to us. And the words that I recall from the media reports somehow trapped in a sort of in-between situation here, and I'd like to understand more rather than just the sort of clinical thing that was put in front of us as our report.
Commissioner?
Through you, Chair, the best way for me to describe it is that it's an orphan property in terms of the land use regulations in the area. So the site, of course, is along Glendale Avenue, just at the easterly boundary of St. Catharines. The next property over actually is in the town of Niagara-on-the-Lake. As I said before, we are operating in a very regulated environment with the Niagara Escarpment Plan, the Greenbelt Plan, the Growth Plan, and all of the other sort of municipal planning documents. This site is caught, the best way I can describe it, is in a vicious circle where there has been the intent to bring it into an urban context for some time, but one policy works against the other. So through the planning process, through the coordinated plan review a couple of years ago, both regional council and the city of St. Catharines took the position to bring forward a recommendation that the lands be included in or be available for development. That then went to the Niagara Escarpment Commission, and the commission said, well, we can't really deal with that directly because it's caught in other regulatory frameworks of the Niagara Escarpment Plan. So what will really kickstart the solution for this property, and it's clearly intended to be an urban site, is for the region to approve the recommendation coming forward. And then the process will continue on with the Niagara Escarpment Commission evaluating whether the position of CANF is valid or not.
If I can, Mr. Chairman, through you to the commissioner, then how could this be interpreted as an urban boundary expansion if it was adjacent to urban boundary but designated other lands under the I guess, authority of the Escarpment Commission? It wouldn't. I'm trying to reconcile the issue on whether or not this is truly an expansion or just a bit of housekeeping to make these properties geographically contiguous.
Commissioner?
Through you, Chair, I would consider this a housekeeping matter. I really would. The designation through the Niagara Escarpment Plan is not urban. That's the issue. Whereas in the growth plan, it's not included in the Greenbelt, so it's not Greenbelt property. It's not identified as that. In order for it to move forward, there has to be a direction from the region that we support the redesignation into an urban category in the Niagara Escarpment Plan.
I'm okay, thank you.
Councillor Beatty?
Just clarification as a member of NEC. I don't believe it was NEC that made the decision. I believe it was requested during the review and that it was put on hold, not by the NEC, but during the process of the review. Would that be correct?
Commissioner?
My understanding, it was put on hold, you're correct, not by the NEC, but by the Ministry of Natural Resources that has oversight on the NEC.
Thank you. That clarifies the matter.
Okay, seeing no more questions, I'll call the question on item 5.5. Recorded vote's been requested. We'll use the buttons. Could you please open them when ready?
The vote is open.
And that carries. Thank you. Now to the balance of the Planning and Economic Development Committee minutes. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? And that carries. Thank you. Moving on to CAO's reports, there are none tonight. Motions, there are none. Are there any notices of motion? Any notices of motion? Councillor Redekop? No. Okay. Seeing none, is there any other business related to announcements? Councillor Annunziata?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wondering when council will be briefed as far as the itinerary for FCM and certainly AMO in August. I know there's a couple burning platform issues that I'd like to deal with, not only at the federal level, but the provincial level, but because FCM is the more pressing conference coming forward, I'm hoping that we can collaborate and coordinate and get those itineraries and possibly those meetings with the various ministries in order.
Okay. This actually is limited to announcements, but I'll let you go ahead and just give a quick response.
Through Chair to Councillor Nunziata, our government relations coordinator is coming to next week's CLT, corporate leadership team, with themes for delegations at both FCM and AMO. Once we take a look at that, then we bring that to council for suggested themes and endorsement.
Okay, I appreciate that. So there will be time then, understanding that FCM is coming up pretty quickly.
Thank you. So we do have items to deal with in closed session, and, pardon me? Councillor Timms, other business?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just on the announcement side, I believe the Niagara Folk Arts Festival kicks off this weekend. And I was meeting this morning and was reminded of the Albanian Folk Arts event in Niagara Falls. Albanian. And so it's just nice to see that the Folk Arts Festival does spread across Niagara region, and that it's an opportunity to celebrate all our diverse backgrounds and heritage and homelands. Can't wait for the English one, but.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you.
With that, I'll ask the clerks to put a motion on the screen. Okay. Oh, sorry, Councillor.
Thank you. Sorry, I didn't get a chance to push that. Just a quick one that this week, tomorrow, at the conclusion of the OSAM conference in Niagara Falls, I'd like to thank Mayor Diodati and his staff and the people of Niagara Falls, the delegates that have chosen to share with us the time here in Niagara. And it's been very, very successful, and as well, the region and its substantial contribution as a sponsor to the event. And if you can, Mr. Chair, indulge. I need to, if I can, I missed asking this question during the corporate services minutes. Councillor Augustine raised an issue about the Burgoyne Bridge. But at a previous meeting when we did debate this, I had asked the CAO about changes to the procurement process.
Councillor, that's not an announcement.
I know it's not an announcement. I asked you for indulgence and you sort of nodded, and I said I wanted to ask a question.
Can I ask you to bring that to the committee, please?
So while you weren't paying attention, I started talking. So now that
you did.
Now that I'm into it, I just want to ask my question, and then we can move on to.
There's a lot of moving parts here.
All right. So I just want an assurance from the CAO when that report may be coming to us about the development of a new procurement policy and the ideas of the changes that Councillor Augustine alluded to, and the points that may be something we could share with the public about how we're going to change the way we do business.
You know, it is far beyond announcements, and you know, because I was asleep at the switch, I'll allow Bart to just give a quick response, but then we're going to be moving on to our regular agenda items.
Yes, so through the chair, I'm currently reviewing our procurement bylaw. Right now, it's in effect as of December 2015 through 2020. That's the normal review date, but given some of the recent trade legislative changes around CETA and SIFTA, in addition to some of the other announcements we've done through Procurement Advisory Committee with regards to the region moving to e-bidding, I am now taking a pretty comprehensive look at our bylaw as we speak, with an eye to present some amendments to the bylaw on a go-forward basis. On a grander scale, we'll definitely be looking at the value for money audit and opportunities where the procurement language within the policy and bylaw can be strengthened.
Thank you. I think we'll deal with the rest of that in corporate services, but thank you very much. You're welcome. So I need to ask committee if if there's anybody that needs to discuss the two confidential reports related to matters of labor relations, or are we just going to be discussing the verbal update from external counsel respecting development charges? So well, let me ask this question. I'll ask it this way. Does anybody have any need to go into closed session for the two matters of labor relations? Seeing none, that will not be part of our in-camera discussion. We will then, I'll ask for a motion to move in camera to get a verbal update from external counsel on development charges. Councillor Dart, Councillor Volpatti, all those in favor? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, could be noted that I'm leaving the room due to the conflict.
Thank you. Please let that be noted. So I'll ask if we could please prepare the council chamber. And I'll remind members that if you're going to be leaving the council chamber, to use the committee room 4 door and entering and exit the chamber during closed session. Councillor Maves. We need to ratify what we did. So if we could,
Yeah, yes.
and I'll take your motion in just a second. Can you throw it up on the screen?
Oh, we're going to ratify those other things first, right?
We're going to ratify it first, yeah.
So there's 3 motions that we.
Yep. Can I do them all at once?
You want to do them all at once?
All at once, if we could. I said it. I said it clearly.
Staff proceed as directed in closed session, that's what they're gonna approve.
Okay. And I said delegate to the CAO.
Delegate to the CAO the authority.
Yep. Are we good to go? Do we get the thumbs up? How do we know? Are we good? We good? Yeah, yeah. I'm looking at the guy behind the glass. Is that good to go? Okay, can I have a motion to accept the report on the screen? Councillor Rigby, seconded by Councillor Luciani. Ratifying the 3 items that, the one item we dealt with in camera, and then the 2 items that were in confidential, but we did not have to deal with. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? And that carries. I'll accept a motion to go back into camera. Councillor Maves, seconded by Councillor Volpatti. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Oh, yes, I'm sorry. So that this council do now move into closed session for the purposes of receiving information of a confidential nature respecting a matter respecting litigation, Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority and the City of Hamilton, judicial review application regarding the decision of Mining and Lands Commissioner, litigation update on a 2-for-1 sale from our lawyer. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? And that carries.
Mr. Chair, on a point of order, can we ask our colleagues who are out on that conflict of interest to come back in? They can come in for this one, right?
They That said, there's no motion, nothing that we did in closed session to approve. Once we come back into open session properly, we'll move to the bylaws, and I'm going to call on Councillor Annunziata once we're ready. Once we're ready to, and just for council's information, bylaw 19.1 has been is the new bylaws by the same number of the business that we took care of earlier with respect to Creek Road. We good? All right. Okay, we're now in open session. Councillor Annunziata.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Moved by myself and seconded by my colleague, Councillor Grenier, that bills 2018-42 to 2018-44 be now read and do pass.
Thank you. Questions or comments? Councillor Redekop first, Councillor Height second.
Bylaw 43 has to come after bylaw 44.
Okay, we are reading, Madam Clerk?
Because we're passing them all at the same time, the actual number or the order is irrelevant.
Thank you. Councillor Height?
Yes, through the staff regarding bylaw 44. In our old bylaw regarding expenses, under election years, it states very clearly, no member shall use facilities, equipment, blah, 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 and no hospitality, etc., will be reimbursed by the region. Do both of those clauses, are they both in CA 024 or GMO 5218 that's referred to? Thank you very much.
Okay. Seeing no more questions, I'll call the questions on the bylaw. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? And I just want to make a note for council's benefit that Councillor Height was wrong. We did not end at 8:30, we ended at 8:43. I'll call this meeting closed. Thank you. What? Oh. Oh, who cares?